The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So I watched the Katie Ledecky race yesterday, and I'm trying to come up with some comps in my head. The only thing I can really think of, and I'm too young to have seen it, and there's no film, there's not even still pictures of this, except for a single photo of Wilt Chamberlain holding up a piece of paper where Harvey Pollack wrote 100 on it. Wilt Chamberlain, 100 points in Hershey, Pennsylvania, March of 1962 against the New York Knicks. That's it. She has the 20 fastest times in the race. I know it hasn't been run that many years. It started in Tokyo in 2021. But the way Katie Ledecky dominates the 1,500 meters, it is something to behold. It is just incredible, and it's got to be demoralizing for the others who are in the race because she's so far ahead that when she finished up, it was a full 10 seconds before the second-place finisher from France came in, and then the third-place finisher came in a second or so behind her. I mean, it's just remarkable how dominant she is in that and how down-to-earth she seems to be. All this training and fame and all the things that go along with it, she's handled it just brilliantly. And you know, she's got her high school teammates there cheering her on. She's always the Bethesda girl. I don't know if she lives here anymore, but man, she is just incredible. We'll get to that. We'll talk more about what's going on with the U.S. basketball team, as I think we can all exhale. They had that close call against South Sudan in the exhibition round. They blew them out yesterday, and it looks like they're rolling along. And it looks like Steve Kerr has hit on something here, that he's got too many guys to fill up 40 minutes. So he's resting certain guys on certain days, you know, not giving them like ceremonial minutes or anything. So Joel Embiid didn't play at all. Well, they play Puerto Rico Friday? Yeah, tomorrow. So he'll start in that game. You know, that's just the way he's doing things. Seems to be working out. And give him the benefit of the doubt. That was really impressive yesterday, what they were able to do. Also, Pat McAfee was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. And I'm not a fan of the show. Here's my problem with the show. There's too many guys on there. And I think one of his guys, A.J. Hawk, isn't even there. He's like on a remote screen. This, I think, and I don't know Pat McAfee at all, but if he asked for my advice, which he wouldn't, but I would say to him, I think there's just a little bit of insecurity on your part that you need too many guys around you, that you need this audience that kind of makes you feel comfortable. You don't need that many guys. He's good. Now, he does dominate the show, but I'm going to play some of what he said on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and I think that he was very, very well-spoken, I think he's smart. He just has a show that doesn't necessarily appeal to, somebody who's in his 60s like I am. But I think he's got some things to say. And he will talk, as you will hear a little bit later on, about the onside kick, which I don't know if they're going to use it tonight. We got the first of the exhibition games, which is between the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears. And we're not going to see Caleb Williams because the Bears aren't playing any of their starters, but the most jarring thing will be when the game begins tonight, and it's on ABC, you will see how the new kickoff works. And it's the 10 guys from the receiving team, or I guess it's be 9 because you got 2 guys back against the line, 10 guys on the kicking team, 5 yards apart, and then the kicker back at the 40-yard line. And if it's a touchback, it's on the 30, so it encourages the kicker to pop it up high enough, keep it out of the end zone, and see if they can get some returns and cut down on injuries and things like that. So there's that. And then if you're going to onside kick, you have to announce that you're going to do it. Yeah, crazy. So McAfee will talk about that and a whole lot more. Somebody reminded me this morning, a friend of mine texted me, that it was 32 years ago today that John Riggins went in the Hall of Fame. And I look for the speech on YouTube. You know, I find all kinds of stuff, as you know, on YouTube, and I would have thought something like that would be up there. I don't know why it's not posted, but Riggo had a few that day. You know, he and I think he's talked about it. He had a number of Bloody Marys as he was getting ready for his speech. But the big thing that stands out about this is that he chose for his inductor, and they do it differently now. Like there's no induction speech, there's an induction speech by the player. There's no introductory speech. I should put it that way. So when you have someone who goes along with you, I believe he or she just stands up there as you unveil the statue. I don't think there's a long introduction. I could be wrong about that. Also, it was done on the steps of the Hall of Fame in the morning, on a Saturday morning. Now they do it as a primetime Saturday night event. But I remember when Joe Gibbs went in, it was just on the steps of the Hall of Fame on a Saturday morning in Canton, and it's really exploded into primetime television, partly because of the NFL Network. They needed more programming, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the upshot of that was, here's John Riggins going into the Hall of Fame. He had his greatest years under Joe Gibbs, right? Or you could even stretch it out and say, well, maybe it was because of the offensive line that he had in front of him. Maybe he puts Joe Bugle as his inductor. There seem to be quite a few options for his inductor or his introducer. He chose Paul Tagliabue. I don't think he knew Paul Tagliabue. Tagliabue was not the commissioner after when he retired in 1985, and he'd only been on the job a few years. Remember, Pete Rozelle retired at the end of the 1989 winter meetings, I believe. So 88 would have been his last season as commissioner of the league. And then Tagliabue had only been there, a few years. But Riggo, I don't think really got the whole thing. So he thought, oh, this is the ultimate honor in sports. Let me get the ultimate person to introduce me. So, Paul Tagliabue really didn't know him, didn't really have a lot to say about him personally, other than he was a great player. So it was among the most unusual, and of course Riggins is known for that, but one of the most unusual induction speeches that I can remember, and it happened on this day in 1992. All right, let me get to Katie Ledecky. Channel 4's got a local reporter who's in Paris and has been reporting back. I'm sorry, I didn't get her name, but this was the conversation that she had with Katie Ledecky after she just absolutely dominated yesterday in the 1500. Pulled away right away. You're watching the race, and she's like a half a lap ahead of everybody else, and they showed her split times, and each lap, it's 50 meters, so 50 meters longer than the pool you probably swim in, and her times didn't deviate. She was like a tenth of a second off on all of them. She's just a swimming machine, as Dan Hicks called it, as she pulled in with the victory. And she set an Olympic record, 15 minutes, 30 seconds at 0.2. And if you've ever swam a couple of laps in the pool, maybe that's something you do to keep in shape, try swimming for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes without taking a break, or 3 minutes. And doing the freestyle, which for me is a lot harder. I do some form of breaststroke, but it's just absolutely amazing to watch what she did. And again, the only comp I could think of was Wilt. Wilt scoring 100 points, averaging 50 points a game. It was mind-boggling to watch her. And this was her conversation with Channel 4 after she wrapped it up, giving a nod to her old high school teammates from Stonebridge High.
You broke your own record. You now have 12 Olympic medals, tied for most ever by a female Olympian. How are you feeling?
I feel great. It's an amazing atmosphere here in Paris, and just wanted to put forth a really good effort and something that I could be really happy with.
Yeah, I saw an article today that said, in the 1500, there's Katie Ledecky and everyone else. How do you feel about your dominance in this event?
I mean, I try not to think about that too much. I just try to put together a great race every time I swim it, and I feel very confident in how I race it and how I need to prepare for it and all of that. So I just rely on my confidence.
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to show you this picture. Stone Ridge showed up for you tonight. They're all here. How
I
does
know.
that feel?
It was amazing just walking around the venue after the medal. I saw so many Stone Ridge t-shirts and lots of familiar faces, so it meant a lot to me to have their support.
Yeah, and last question. Speaking of Stone Ridge, you may race in the relay swim with Erin in the 4x200. How special would that be? 2 Stone Ridge girls in one relay.
Very special. I mean, it's just been special to be here on this trip with her and Phoebe and to share these memories with them.
Yeah, she is due to compete in the final of the 4x200 freestyle relay today. If she medals in that, and it's likely the U.S. will, they won silver in Tokyo after winning the gold in the 2 previous Olympics, so it's likely that she will collect medal number 13. She got her 12th medal yesterday, 8 of them gold, and 7 of them individual golds. The 12 medals ties Dara Torres, who was swimming into her 40s, if I'm not mistaken, and Natalie Coughlin and Jenny Thompson. They have all collected 12 medals, so she will likely pass them today. Just absolutely incredible. This was Tony and Mike on PTI, not just on what she did, but finally, they got the river clean enough so that they could hold the triathlon as they tackled the 2 swim events yesterday on PTI.
Katie Ledecky won gold in the 1500 by more than 10 seconds, dominant as usual. It's her 12th career Olympic medal, including 8 gold. And over at the Seine, organizers finally cleared triathletes to swim in the river. So that drama now done and out of here. Which of these developments, Tone, was bigger to you?
The biggest swim development would have been had Katie Ledecky not won the 1500, because she wins the 1500 all the time. Going into this 1500, she had the 19 fastest times of all time, and now she's got the 20 fastest times of all time. She set an Olympic record today. So I mean, it's a fairly new race. Until the last Olympics, women didn't go beyond 800 meters. Katie Ledecky was dominant, I believe, at 800, and she's more dominant at 1500. The larger swim story tonight, tomorrow, and the next day will be how many triathletes come down with E. coli bacteria illness and how many have to be hospitalized. Because you can't really believe for a second that if the river was filled with E. coli yesterday, that it suddenly magically disappeared. Did the mayor of Paris go in today? No, I don't think so. I read a lot of quotes by a lot of people. They were basically the same. They went like this: the water tasted terrible and it looked brown. And so I thought that on those boats, the rescue boats where the people are swimming, I just assumed they had bacteriologists on that boat. And I assumed, Mike, that when they had the gold medal, they also put you on an IV as soon as they gave you the gold medal.
Tony, I'm glad you talked about that, but I couldn't care less about it. We knew this was coming. We talked about it. You and I for 3 days have said you people are dopes for trying to even have triathletes swim in the Seine. And I've said, all the big city rivers, I love them all. So I got go to big cities. I like to sit at cafes to eat sitting by the river, not drinking what's in the river.
Not in the river.
I don't care about that.
Not in the river.
Not in the river. Not in. I do care about Katie Ledecky. Tony, the 20 fastest times, Tony, she was out so far ahead. It was great to hear Michael Phelps in studio talk about training sometimes with Katie Ledecky and how he would marvel at her training routine. Come on now. Michael Phelps, the most decorated, I think, Olympian. What's he got? 18 medals ever of all time in anything? And he's saying, no. She's the GOAT. I found that whole thing compelling. And let me go off book for a second. Léon Marchand of France, 200 butterfly, 200 backstroke, wins twice in front of the home folks. The roar of the crowd there seemed to just come right through the television set. I was like, my God, if that was one place I wanted to be this week, it would be at the swimming venue. You know how exciting the swimming venue is at any Olympics, but this one particularly.
You undersold Phelps. Phelps has 28 medals. And I'll just say this. When they started talking yesterday about going from a triathlon to a duathlon, then they'll go to the unoathlon and making all this stuff up. Yeah. The triathlon in the Olympics is a terrible insult to the greatest Olympic event there is, the decathlon, the DECA, the 10.
Decathlon, yeah. I mean, you look at it, I don't know how you look at it now, but 1976, Bruce Jenner became one of the most famous athletes in the world, winning the decathlon on the Wheaties box. Now, of course, Caitlyn Jenner, but it is an incredible Olympic event. There are 10 disciplines that you have to do, and you may be good at one, you may not be good at the others, but when they add up the points, if you're overall good enough, you win the decathlon. It's and really there isn't attention on that. Dan and Dave, remember that? The campaign going into 1992, one of them didn't make the Olympic team. Each of them, I think, won medals over the course of the Olympics, but that was the big, I think it was Reebok. I don't think it was Nike. It was Reebok. And that was a big deal. Who's in the decathlon now? Nobody knows. We have skateboarding, we have breakdancing, but whatever happened to the decathlon? I always thought that should really be the ultimate Olympic event, the decathlon. And I think that's kind of the event that made the Olympics famous, I think. Well, track and field for sure. But, it does not have the cachet that it used to have. Speaking of numbers and people watching, I've got some of those, and it's incredible what the numbers are, how many people are watching these Olympics. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got a new lineup around here, in case you don't know. Bram Weinstein does his show now at 11 o'clock every day. Used to be in the afternoon. Now it's at 11 o'clock. And the Tony Kornheiser Show, which used to be from 11 to 12, is now after Greeny, and that's at 2 o'clock. And today is what? Today is Thursday. So he's not doing a show today, but the 3 days of the week that he does the show, it's going to be at 2 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock. All right, so here are the numbers for the Olympics. First of all, the money. NBC Universal said it broke the record for advertising sales with its coverage of the Summer Games, beating the previous high of $1.25 billion, which they brought in the last Olympics in Tokyo. Here's the thing you got to understand about that. It's not that they just broke the record, but the television ratings are up 77% from Tokyo. Now, I know it was delayed a year because of COVID and the time difference and all the things that went along with Tokyo, but still up 77%. And I'm going to give you some of the numbers here in just a second, but they got also more than $500 million of that $1.25 billion in first-time sponsors who are probably going to be very happy with the results that they got. Now, it looks like NBC has hooked into a bargain here, assuming that these Olympics will continue to draw viewership, and I think it's going to be even better when they get to Los Angeles in 2028. We talked earlier, a couple weeks ago, about the 40th anniversary of the 84 games, which were in Los Angeles. Of course, we had the Russians boycott, and a lot of things went into that. But, the stars that came out of that, Carl Lewis, Mary Lou Retton, it was just a remarkable 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, that was in Los Angeles. And these numbers here, get this. NBC said its ratings went to 41.5 million Sunday when Simone Biles and the U.S. gymnastics team competed. Gymnastics, women's gymnastics, always does well. 41.5 million. You're getting into almost Thanksgiving Day NFL numbers. That's like a really big game, like, I don't know, Kansas City and Buffalo, let's say, on a 4 o'clock window on a Sunday afternoon. Those are enormous numbers. And, we're in the dead of summer here. People are away. That's part of the reason, like, the NFL doesn't start its schedule until after Labor Day because they found they were suffering a little bit from people being away. 41.5 million people watching Simone Biles and the U.S. Olympic team. She is the grand dame of Olympic gymnastics. But man, oh man, the opening ceremony, people floating along in boats, 28.6 million. NBC said it got 31 million for the men's gymnastics. And we got a bronze in that. We hadn't won any medals since 2008. They say that, yes, the streaming has something to do with it for sure, and the time zone, as I mentioned. But think about this. the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics had historically low ratings, averaging just over 11 million. So we're talking about 4 times that for the women's gymnastics and 3 times that for the men's gymnastics. It's just mind-boggling how many people are watching, and it looks like NBC got themselves an enormous bargain, $7.7 billion to televise the games through 2032. So congratulations to them. The money they've gotten so far, we've still got another week of this to go, more than a week, $1.25 billion. I know some of those numbers are committed into events next week, but this has been obviously a rousing success for NBC, and the Olympics are working on television. All right, some baseball. We wrap up the trade deadline the other day, and it was kind of a yawn. I talked a little bit yesterday about what Tom Verducci wrote. I'll get more into his column from SI.com, but this was Buster Olney last night, who covers baseball for ESPN, on with Tony and Mike on PTI, and his thoughts on what happened at the trade deadline and who came away a winner.
I would go with 2 teams in the National League West. First, the Los Angeles Dodgers do what they usually do, adding across the board Jack Flaherty, the best available starting pitcher. But to me, the most impressive team was the San Diego Padres, because they absolutely loaded up on their bullpen, making a deal with Tampa Bay for Jason Adam, trading for Tanner Scott, the best available left-handed reliever. Look, we've seen in October in recent years that with all the off days, you can win with just a couple of starters and a great bullpen, and that's what the Padres have now, on top of Manny Machado and so many other great players on that roster. Dylan Cease, Luis Arraez, A.J. Preller, their general manager, went for it at the deadline this year.
Buster, contenders were at the heart of this flurry of pre-deadline movement, but of the contenders, is there somebody you think could have done more?
Yeah, the Baltimore Orioles, who seem to settle for middle-of-the-rotation type answers for their needs at starting pitcher. Look, the closest comps to where the Orioles are now, loaded with position players in the last 10 years with the Chicago Cubs and the Houston Astros. What'd the Cubs do? They spent $155 million on John Lester. They traded for Jake Arrieta. The Astros traded for Justin Verlander on top of Dallas Keuchel. The Orioles don't have those dominant type starters as they move forward. Corbin Burns is a free agent after this year. At some point, Mike Elias, their general manager, has to dip into that great farm system that they have and build a starting rotation that can win in October.
We're going to ask you to divert here, go way off road, and ask you about a team that is not a contender by miles, and that's the Chicago White Sox, who, Buster, I've been saying that they're the worst team I have ever seen in my life. They just lost their 17th consecutive game today. Is there a path out that you see for them? Have you ever seen a team this bad?
No. Look, their historical comp is clearly the 1962 Mets, who are an expansion team, and they finished 40-120. And it's going to be an open question as to whether or not the White Sox are going to get to 40 wins by the end of the year. And what's really scary is they traded most of their best players before the deadline. They didn't make a deal with Garrett Crochet, but I think you make an argument that they should shut him down. There's no point in having an all-star left-hander pitch the rest of the year. They should put him on ice, save him for the winter, keep his trade value intact, and make a deal then and try to get pieces that'll move them forward.
Wow. I have to admit, Buster, I'm reeling a little bit by your takedown of the Baltimore Orioles. I've been sitting here for a couple of days thinking, well, they picked up a couple of starters. That's really going to help them. So this is a perspective that I wasn't used to. We'll get you out of here on this. You wrote that we could still have player movement. I didn't know how that happened. How would that work with player movement?
Yeah, and Tony, in theory, Major League Baseball made rules that eliminated August trades. But you guys remembered what happened with the Angels last year. Artie Moreno, their owner, made the decision that they were going to keep Shohei Ohtani rather than trade him. Then they made a series of trades to try to win, and then they proceeded to lose like all their games at the beginning of August and fell out of it. And Moreno's response was basically like a kid tipping over a board game. It wasn't going well, and so he put a bunch of players out on waivers at the end of August. and they were claimed by teams like the Cleveland Guardians, like the Cincinnati Reds. And while that made a lot of people queasy in the sport, they didn't put in a rule to stop that. So in talking with executives around baseball the last couple of weeks, they're telling me the same thing will happen. As contenders fall out of races, they may start dumping players out into the waiver market. That's something that's banned in fantasy football leagues, but not in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and something to watch here for the Orioles, that maybe Mike Elias has an eye on those potential situations and maybe looking for guys who are going to be dumped at that point at the end of August when all things are exhausted for getting to the postseason. And that may make a lot of sense for this team. Now, what they did at the deadline, you heard what Buster Olney said about it. This was Tom Verducci, SI.com, the other day, where he wrote, "The Orioles need to explain their curious strategy. The young positional core of this team is reminiscent of the 2014-16 Cubs, needing only a power arm in the rotation and bullpen to finish off a championship roster. Those Cubs fearlessly signed John Lester and traded for Aroldis Chapman. Baltimore failed to get an impact player." Now, that was pretty common among all teams at the deadline. Remember this. He says, "The Orioles added starting pitcher Zach Eflin, whose strikeout rate has dropped from 9.4 to 9 innings to 7.3 this year, and Trevor Rogers, who in 3 years has lost 2 miles an hour off his fastball, and this year has the worst whip of any pitcher with 100 innings. They picked up 2 relievers." I love this name. Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, whom the Phillies discarded because they don't throw enough strikes and were booted from manager Rob Thompson's circle of trust. They picked up outfielders Austin Slater, Christian Pache, and Eloy Jimenez, a player with no defensive value and a .345 slugging percentage who hits more ground balls than any hitter. What the Orioles did was hedge their bets while trying to fill their 2025 roster with multiple moves. But here's the problem. Those moves require the Major League staff to fix those players in a short period of time, such as Rogers finding his velocity, Dominguez and Soto finding command, and Jimenez finding a way to get the ball in the air. One more risk. Baltimore turned over 7 players on their 26-man roster. That's a huge threat to the chemistry that this team had developed over the past 2 seasons. And you've seen what the Yankees have done. They're on a tear now. Jazz Chisholm is just killing it. And they also picked up a pitcher in Mark Leiter Jr. So they have now won 5 in a row. The Orioles take 3 out of 4 from Toronto, but it's only a half-game lead, and they're playing a first-place team starting 4 games beginning tonight in Cleveland. So there's that. As for what Verducci said overall about the trade deadline and what a yawner it was, he said that there were no blockbusters. Instead, teams maneuvered feverishly to find bullpen arms, most of whom are fungible, low-profile pitchers in their 30s who have bounced among teams but may have found that one pitch or mechanical adjustment to boost their strikeout rate enough to catch the fancy of an analytics department. From Andrew Chafin, who's with his 6th team, 3 of whom traded him, Tyler Zubin, 5th team, 3 of whom have released him. Relief pitchers sucked out of the air of the trade deadline room as soon as they have more and more outs every game. Of the 34 players traded Tuesday, 20 of them were relief pitchers. He says, "You like offense? Good luck finding it." 9 position players were traded Tuesday. 8 of them are below average hitters. The best bat traded was Isaiah Kinfer-Falala, a career .264 hitter. The bat traded in July, best bat, was Jorge Soler, .240 hitter. And then he says, just 10 years ago, the average Major League starting pitcher lasted 6 innings, threw 96 pitches, and earned the victory in 70% of the games. This year, the average starter goes only 5.3 innings, throws 86 pitches, and wins only 59% of the time. Now, some of that may be related to getting yanked before the game becomes official, 5th inning, all that. But that's the devaluation of the starting pitcher in terms of how they're used, but not how they're getting paid. And, maybe the contracts of people like Steven Strasburg, who got that $240 million extension and basically, blew to bits for the Nationals, maybe teams are shying away from that. He says, if you're looking for the face of the deadline, you could well choose Mike Baumann, one of those fungible relief pitchers. He's bounced among 4 teams in the past 68 days, traded by the Orioles to the Mariners, purchased by the Giants, and on Tuesday traded to the Angels. He throws 96 miles an hour. His career ERA is 4.68. By the way, just thinking about this, these guys who get traded like that over the course of the season, do they go through renting apartments in the city? Do they know they're going to be on the move again? Would they not do that and, kind of put them in a position mentally like, yeah, I expect to go again? How does that work? A guy who moves from 4 different places during the course of the season, you really wonder about that. And do the moving vans move from place to place with him? I assume he didn't stay long enough to buy a house, but this is one of those things that guys deal with that you don't necessarily think about. Oh, well, we don't have to hold a benefit for them. These are multi-million-dollar players in many cases, but still, So, look back at what they've done at the trade deadline in recent years and starting pitchers on the move. Max Scherzer moving in 2021 and 2023. Remember, he was traded to the Dodgers, right? 2021. Then the Mets trade him to Texas last year, helps him win a World Series. Zach Greinke, 2019. Yu Darvish, 2017. Cole Hamels, 2015. John Lester, 2014. Tarek Skubal from the Tigers was apparently the big prize, but the Tigers didn't get what they wanted, I guess. And then the odd case of Garrett Crochet of the White Sox, the worst team in baseball, and as you heard Buster Olney say, threatening the 62 Mets. What do you do with him? Because he's told teams prior to the deadline, if you trade for me, I'm not pitching in the postseason. Not going to pitch in October unless you give me a contract extension. So that's one of the reasons he stayed. Jack Flaherty goes to the Dodgers, and the feeling was from Verducci they got a steal. There was a story in the New York Post that the Yankees were interested, but there was some medical that they were worried about. Remember, Flaherty was here with the Orioles last year. Didn't help them to win in the playoffs, but helped them to win 102 games. So there's that, and there's other issues around baseball that have you going. Yeah, I mean, what's the big deal about the trade deadline if nothing happens? This used to be one of the most exciting times of the year where you would see some big names change teams, and you'd see like a really good starting pitcher on the move, and like who was the Tigers pitcher? There was a Tigers pitcher that was traded or a Brave, whatever it was, but John Smoltz wound up being the player who was named, and those kind of things happen. Like, oh God, what are they doing? And then 2 years down the road, you go, ooh, look at that! Look what they did! Look who they stole in all of that. So Thompson, like. Perfect example. They trade John Lester, who retired before the end of the season, and they get a player here that was productive. They trade him at the deadline, and maybe it works out. I don't know. It just does not have the juice that it had in years past. And let's see what happens with Mike Elias, who is the darling of baseball. He was Executive of the Year last year, but he's facing criticism for what he did. And when they were conservative in trading and hanging on to the prospects that Elias has been smart enough to draft, there was that outlying, Peter Angelos, that's the reason that they don't want to pay anybody. Well, now that they got Rubenstein, I don't know. I don't quite understand why they were as conservative as they were, other than they really believe that these prospects are going to ripen. And look, Jackson Holliday, who they brought up in May, and they said, oh, yeah, this is not going to be like an up and down thing. We're going to stick it out with him. He may struggle at the plate initially, but we're staying with him. And he struck out like 31 times. He had 3 or 4 hits and mostly strikeouts. They sent him back down, comes back up yesterday because Mora is going to be out maybe for the rest of the season with an elbow injury. And what does he do in his return? His first major league home run is a grand slam. So those kind of stories they hope will continue for them, and maybe by next year they can really, close the door, seal the deal, and get that big experienced major league pitcher who can put them over the top. This is not going to be a one-year sprint for the Orioles. If they get, who knows what happens. That's the thing about the playoffs now. It's a lot different than it used to be when it was just 2 teams, American League champion, National League champion, then they went to 2 divisions in each league, and now, 14 playoff teams with various rounds, including wild card. It's so different than it used to be, and it's, how you get hot when it happens for you. Hey, the A's get hot once in a while. the White Sox haven't lost all their games. So you never know how that's going to go. Coming up, we'll talk about what they did yesterday as they took care of South Sudan. Brian Windhorst with a recap of that. Also, we're going to have preseason football tonight. And if you watch from the jump, it's going to look weird. Kickoffs are not going to look the same. Former kickoff specialist and punter Pat McAfee, now more famous for what he does on TV and radio, he'll talk about it as he discussed it yesterday with Dan Patrick. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. Where has our kickoff gone? They've futzed around with it. They've done different things to make the game safer, but it basically disappeared from the NFL last year. We had a Super Bowl with 13 kickoffs and no returns. So there's been some tweaking. And tonight, we get our first look at it at the Hall of Fame game as the Houston Texans take on the Chicago Bears. And the look of the kickoff is going to be very, very different. They've also futzed around with the onside kickoff. And Pat McAfee, who used to do that for the Indianapolis Colts, talked about it yesterday with Dan Patrick. We'll get to that and much more. And Jim Lampley's got a new book out. Worked with Lamps many, many years ago at WFAN. He became the voice of boxing for many, many years and was great at it. And HBO lost the contract 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and Lamps pretty much hasn't been heard from on television. I thought he would continue his career doing it someplace else. He's the best there is, but I guess boxing isn't really much on TV anymore. And Max Kellerman, who used to do the morning show on ESPN Radio, and I believe this is how it works, he's being paid by ESPN. He had a contract, but they got rid of him a year ago, and this is all accounting, even though he's being paid by the network, he doesn't show up on the bottom line for stockholders, but as part of the deal, he can't work for anybody else. So he's being paid by ESPN, but he can't provide services for anybody else, even though ESPN doesn't want him to be on the air. So he was supposed to, and this is, I think I've heard Lampley say this, that he wanted Max to replace him as being the voice of boxing, but so far that hasn't happened. But Lamps is really, really smart, and it was 50 years ago. I think it was 1974 when he made his debut. Brune Arledge had this idea that he was going to have sideline reporters at college football games who were college students. So he would change them from year to year. He'd have tryouts, and, let's say he found a guy from Syracuse or North Carolina or Michigan, someplace like that, and that person would be on the sidelines, and he would have the feel of being a college student, might have relationships with some of the players, whatever. And I don't know, they did a bunch of tryouts, and what they found was they didn't have anybody who was good enough to do that. And Jim Lampley, who was a grad student at the time at the University of Miami, if I'm not mistaken, submitted a tape. He was 25 years old, looked younger, and he got the job, and he stayed with it. And that launched the career of Jim Lampley, who became very, very successful at ABC and later with CBS, and I guess has done Olympics for NBC, and now is in his 70s. He's got a book out, and he talked about some of the great moments of his boxing covering life, including and we'll get to this story. You remember the Riddick-Bowe fight with Evander Holyfield that took place in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace in 1993, and that hang-gliding guy flew into the ring? One of the most amazing moments in boxing. I remember seeing it live. I was watching it at a friend's house on pay-per-view, and it was absolutely stunning. Right in the middle of the fight, comes flying into the ring, and Lampley recounts that story a little bit later on this hour. All right, U.S. Olympic team, after some close calls in the exhibition round, proved that when the money's on the line, they perform. And South Sudan, who came the closest to beating them in the exhibition round, the U.S. needed a late layup by LeBron James, and I think South Sudan got up 3 shots in the last 8 seconds of the game. None of them went in, and they held on to win. Not that it would have damaged them in any way for the Olympics, because those games didn't count, but it would have been, whoa, look at that. And since then, everybody's calmed down. And I guess the biggest issue that Coach Steve Kerr has had is getting players in the game. So in the last game, they did not have Jason Tatum in the game at all. And there was this big, oh, my God, look at that. What a controversy. I can't believe this. And Kerr said something like, I feel really stupid. But he also said it's a 40-minute game. You can't really play more than 10 players. So he didn't play, and he said, look, he's going to play in the next game, and he did. In fact, he started him yesterday along with LeBron James and Steph Curry and Devin Booker and Anthony Davis. And out of the starting lineup was Joel Embiid. And Embiid didn't play a second in that game. As they noted during the telecast, he was high-fiving his teammates, very much engaged in rooting them on, but didn't get on the floor. And is this another controversy here? No, he's going to start against Puerto Rico on Friday, tomorrow. That's the way things work. And this was Brian Windhorst covering the Olympics for ESPN, talking to Kevin Negandhi last night on SportsCenter about that decision not to play Embiid and the easy victory over South Sudan, 103-86.
It's going to continue to be this way because Steve Kerr is going to change his lineups depending on the matchup. The matchup for this game required quickness and speed. That is not Joel Embiid. They went with a faster, longer starting lineup with Jason Tatum and Anthony Davis in it. And frankly, Kevin, just about everything Steve Kerr and USA Basketball has done in this run-up in these early games here in the Olympics is turning to gold. His lineups and his game plans are working, even though it's uncomfortable at times to sit superstar players. It's working. If you look at the way this game played out, the U.S.'s second unit was a killer unit. Totally dominated the South Sudan. The lineup that he put together in the second unit totally changed the game. The front line played well enough, held the game down. The second unit did really well. By the way, Derek White, the guy who got criticized for being picked over Jaylen Brown, Derek White's been one of the team's 3 or 4 best players. He had a brilliant game tonight, one of 6 players to be in double figures. And Steve Kerr said after the game, look, this is not about the soap opera of the NBA. This is not about who's playing to get you through February and March and whatever. This is about winning the gold medal, and everything else goes to the side. He believes the team believes in that. And he also said, guess what? On Saturday, Joel Embiid will be back in the starting lineup against Puerto Rico. Kevin Durant will be on the bench. Drew Holiday, who, by the way, scored 15 points in the opener against Serbia and didn't start today, he'll be back on the starting lineup, and everybody's fine with it.
Yeah, you mentioned the second unit. Some of the guys, KD, Bam, Anthony Edwards coming off the bench, Halliburton and White, you mentioned having 10 points here. So we saw Halliburton, we saw Tatum on the floor. What else stood out that made this team so successful today?
Yeah, Bam Adebayo, Kevin, was all over me after the game because I speculated that he might be the player that would see his minutes reduced to get Tatum back in the game. And all he did was score 18 points and have 7 rebounds and probably the best game he's ever played for the national team. And he gave me extreme side-eye for daring to speculate that he might not play. But this is the thing. This team is so deep that this is what they're going to do. And this second unit that they used in this game was stocked with great defensive players, and the South Sudan, like Serbia before them and probably more teams after them, cannot compete with that second unit. That's where the U.S. is winning these games, and that's their plan to get to that 5th consecutive gold medal.
It is all working right now. And by the way, Steph Curry was 1 for 9, but we saw him with 4 assists, getting everybody involved. Team
Maybe
USA
he should get benched.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to play well. That's going to play really well with his head coach.
Yeah, no question. Look, he 1 for 9, and they win by 17. So that tells you how they may get a tougher test. And I believe I said tomorrow, Puerto Rico, obviously Saturday. So it's going to be Saturday when they play their next game. All right, tonight is the Hall of Fame game in Canton. It's the Houston Texans against the Chicago Bears. And the most jarring thing that you will see when the game begins is how it looks on the kickoff. The new format where you have and Mark Maskey's got a story about it today in the Post. He says the new play begins with 10 prospective tacklers on the kicking team lined up only 5 yards from the closest blockers on the receiving team. That eliminates the long run down the field for would-be tacklers and the accompanying high-speed collisions. The tacklers and blockers cannot move until the ball is caught by the returner or hits the ground. From there, the action is intended to resemble a play from the line of scrimmage. Now, if there's a touchback, it's at the 30-yard line. They thought about putting it at the 35 to really encourage a kicker to make sure it doesn't go in the end zone. They may find that it's just going to make sense to continue to do what they've been doing and kick it out of the end zone. That's what they did last year, went on the 25, used to go on the 20. They thought maybe that would encourage returns if you put it at the 25. Really didn't. Now it's the 30. Could they actually move it down the road to the 35? We'll have to see. But that's how that's going to look tonight, in case you really haven't been caught up on all this. There's 2 returners, and the kicker is back at the 40-yard line. So the kicker stands alone. It's going to be a very interesting look. Also, there's the new rules for the onside kick, and you now have to tell the referee that you're going to onside kick. The other team knows it's coming. Pat McAfee was a longtime punter with the Indianapolis Colts. He also did the kickoffs because they had Adam Vinatieri, who was older at that point. He did not kick off, but he kicked field goals and extra points. And McAfee, now host on ESPN, making an appearance yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show and discussing what the onside kick is now and what it used to be.
Yeah, I think the onside kick was something that was very special to football for a very long time. At any moment in the fourth quarter, or if your team was behind, there was a glimmer of hope that a kicker was going to be able to hit a perfect ball, and then the guys on the kickoff team were going to be able to make some miraculous play, and then, oh yeah, we got this thing that has like a 2% chance of success rate, but then also our quarterback's going to have to go now another 60 yards somehow against a defense that they haven't been able to do it all game, which is why we're behind. So it was like there was always a glimmer of hope. There was always something that you could hold at the end of the game and maybe get your team back into it. But with the new rules that came with the kickoff, with the no lead run up and the amount of players where they have to be, you can't overload, you have to keep they kind of eliminated it from the game by themselves. So the fact now that we'll never see a surprise onside kick again is a bummer. I was on the field whenever Thomas Morstead hit the ambush at halftime of the Super Bowl, obviously the biggest surprise onside kick in the history of the sport. They would go on to win a Super Bowl. And honestly, that was a wild night. Incredible kick by Thomas, who was a rookie.
Could you sense it at the time, being a kicker, watching a kicker, like a pitcher has tells, with a pitch? Like, could you sense anything that was happening?
His little run-up was interesting, because, I did some surprise onside kicks in our run with the Indianapolis Colts as well, and it was always cool to get that call, because anytime you're doing one of those, if you fail, you're giving the ball to the other team in very, very favorable position. And field position is literally what you're getting paid for when you're a punter and a kickoff guy. So I think you could see in his run up a little bit, it might have been a little bit different, but Thomas Morstead, the guy that did that, actually taught me how to punt going into the NFL. So he and I, very tight, like very close friends. So whenever I see him pull that off, it's like, I'm pumped for him, but also this sucks because I'm supposed to have a Super Bowl ring at the age of 22. So it's like the surprise onside kick was a beautiful thing. And it used to be something that a lot of kickers took a lot of pride in. Like Sebastian Janikowski, he used to be able to hit a high hop off, especially over in the Coliseum whenever they played on that baseball dirt. He used to be able to hit a ball off of the ground, toe it, which hurts your groin, hip flexor, and your toe. You got to really sacrifice a lot. Hit that thing right in the ground, it would bounce up through like to the third floor almost, and then come down. They would be able to get the jumper. Mason, whenever he was at the Packers, had a great one. It was like something that a lot of people worked on, and it was something you took a lot of pride in, because if you had the opportunity to do it, you're actually affecting the game. It's a turnover. You're changing the game completely at the kicker position, which you can't always do. At the punter position, you can't always do. So it became something that guys started working on less and less and less. And then with the way the rules changed, it seemingly just kind of worked itself out. But now with the new kickoff rules, that's going to be weird to look at, I think, with the landing zone and where the team's going to be, where the kicker's going to be. Obviously, the XFL had it. The XFL doesn't have 49 million eyes on it whenever they're having games. It's a little bit different. So I think people are going to have to get used to that. But they're trying to keep it in the game. They're trying to evolutionize it all. But the onside kick, I think, has been sacrificed and compromised for a few years now, and now it's officially out, which is a bummer. I'm not happy about it at all.
Could you call an audible and do an onside kick when you were with the Colts?
Yeah, so the one I hit to myself against the Houston Texans was not called. I mean, that was all me. And if I don't get that, I just get up and just walk right out of that stadium. That's on Thursday Night Football. But the reason why that happened is because we hit a surprise onside kick to the left earlier in the season. We hit a surprise onside kick to the right earlier in the season. So teams started putting their teams up against us for every single kickoff. And that actually became the case study that NFL used for the iteration of the kickoff that it was, where you had 10 or 8 people up within 20 yards of the ball, because we faced the hands team for every single kickoff. So like I had the highest touchback percentage, like maybe in the history of the NFL, because teams couldn't set up a return. So I would hit that thing like 1 yard in the end zone. They would have to take a knee because their hands team was in there because they didn't want to get hit by a surprise onside. So I'm just stealing stats here. You know, I'm loving everything about it. I don't have anywhere near the talent of everybody else, but we're lucking out. But they're on the right, they're on the left. The middle was wide open, as you can see in the thing. So yeah, I gave a little hamstring tap to my guys, basically said, stay out of there. Hit it to myself. It worked out. And most athletic thing I've ever done in my entire life. But if I don't get that, Chuck Pagano says, just go ahead, quit. You know, hang up the helmet, hang up the jersey.
Yeah, that's the life of a kicker. So that's Pat McAfee on that. As for this new kickoff format and the story that Mark Maskey wrote about it in the Post today, he's got some quotes from two of the longtime coaches in the league, and they're going to be interested in watching this tonight. Their teams aren't participating. It's Houston and Chicago, but Steelers coach Mike Tomlin says, I think anybody that's saying they got a handle on it is probably lying or naive, man. There's no video. All we have is words on a page. I think that's the component of it that makes it exciting. There's going to be some anxiety among my peers regarding those concepts until we get some video on it. I'd imagine there's a lot of guys in my position who are going to be watching the Hall of Fame game to see what it looks like. I'll be looking at it at the EA Sports video game when it comes out to see what it looks like. And then there's John Harbaugh, who's actually was a special teams coach for Andy Reid in Philadelphia before he became the head coach of the Ravens. He says nobody can really say because even with the spring league reps, there are different players. You know, we saw it in the UFL. In fact, Danny Smith is quoted in this, former Redskins special teams coach, now with the Steelers. He's been studying the XFL on this. And he said this is more from Harbaugh. He said it's going to be a different play. How's it going to affect us? I don't know either. I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful we come out here and we act like we look like we know what we're doing. We hope we coach it in the right way. We hope it's an advantage for us for part of the season. So uncharted territory with the new kickoff rules, which we'll get a look at tonight in the Hall of Fame game. Coming up, Jim Lampley's got a memoir out and tells the story of the night he was doing the fight between Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield when Fan Man flew into the ring. Yes, absolutely. He flew into the ring, not a drone, a person in a glider flew in the ring. We'll get that story and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Rams coming up at 11, Tony now at 2 o'clock here on ESPN 630. I've been serious about this, but I've looked at my family history and have talked about living to 100. As I get older, I don't know how realistic that is. My father lived to be 94 years old, but, you know, I could see the effects of aging at the end. His eyesight was nearly gone, and his balance wasn't very good, and ultimately a couple of falls is what claimed his life. But, you know, he lived a long, long time and was very healthy for most of his life. But, man, the 100 milestone is tough. We saw Betty White and Bob Barker get to the doorstep of that. I think Betty White was like 2 weeks away from her 100th birthday when she passed away. As a matter of fact, People magazine put her on the cover celebrating her 100th. And it came out after, unfortunately, she had passed away. But that's magazine deadlines, and that's kind of the way they work. But there is a local fan of the football team, whatever you want to call them, Redskins, Commanders, Washington football team. She's been a fan of all of them. Melba Jacobson, who turned 100 yesterday. And she's been visiting training camp every year since her 90th birthday, which, of course, would be 10 years ago, 2014. She didn't go when they had COVID. No fans were allowed at camp that year. But she said that she came to Washington in 1941 from Texas. And there was no television in those days. And she would listen to the games on the radio, and Sammy Baugh was the quarterback. So she got to see the second of the championships. The first one with Baugh was 1937 when the team moved here from Boston, and he was a rookie out of TCU, and they won the title. The second one was 1942. They went to the championship game a couple of other times. I guess by coming here in 41, though, she also missed the 73-0 game in 1940, so there's that. But she is I guess no better way to put it than die hard, right? She's 100 years old, and she's as big a fan of the team as there is. She went last year for her 99th birthday, and Chase Young, who was still with the team, wearing number 99, gave her a 99 jersey. She calls the players my boys. She gave them hugs on the field, she said, even if they were sweaty. She's had relationships with a number of players over the years, including quarterbacks Kirk Cousins and Joe Theismann. And Theismann sent her a birthday video last year saying, "Happy 100 and many, many more years. You are a special person. In fact," Theismann said, "you are my hero." I don't know what day she's going out there. Hopefully not today when it's 100 degrees. Maybe tomorrow, or maybe she'll get a special chance to go to training camp. They're going to be in New York next week practicing against the Jets. But she said she'd like to meet the new owners. "I want to be introduced and say hello and ask them some questions," which I'm sure can be arranged. And she said that, when she was growing up, her mother actually couldn't be disturbed when the games were going on. So our mother must have been a big fan right away. She's Jewish, and she said in the Jewish tradition, people say, "May you live to be 120. Or at least, she says, until they win the Super Bowl. Everybody should have a good life and live as long as I have. I like everybody." The Super Bowl wish, I would say her chances of seeing it while she's still alive went up exponentially a year ago when the team was sold. The chance to win it when Dan Snyder owned the team, and I think Snyder did, in fact, come out and greet her at one of her visits to camp. I think I remember that. He was trying to turn over a new leaf and be fan-friendly and all that. But, I'm sure that Josh Harris and Mitch Rales and Mark Ein, they're all Jewish guys. They would like to meet her, whether they're Jewish or not. But, the Jewish tradition says, "May you live to be 120. I'm not pushing for 120. If I make 100, that's great. But mazel tov to her, to Melba Jacobson, who turned 100 yesterday, and I guess we'll get a visit to the practices. A couple of ticket stories. One, the Sunday ticket. That you remember this lawsuit last month where the NFL was staring down the barrel of paying out $14 billion, not million, $14 billion in damages from a class action suit filed by Sunday ticket subscribers against the NFL. Well, judge looked at this yesterday, U.S. Judge Philip Gutierrez, and he said that the jury did not follow his instructions in determining the damages. And he said that there could be a new trial because the 8-person jury came up with its own calculations for the damages. Now, you remember this was June 27th, so a little over a month ago. They awarded $4.7 billion in damages to residential and commercial subscribers after it ruled the NFL violated antitrust laws in distributing out-of-market Sunday afternoon games on a premium subscription service. As I understand it, some of these games would be available for free. Like if you have the Sunday ticket, you may have the games on the ticket that are also going to be on Fox and CBS, but they're charging you as part of the package. And if you're like a Cleveland Browns fan and you want to see all the Browns games, you would have the Sunday tickets. And they also said it was only one provider, which was DirecTV. So that caused it to be, the old monopoly. Now, here's how they calculated this. They used the 2021 list price of $294, subtracted $102.74, the average price that was actually paid by residential Sunday ticket subscribers. I guess they gave people deals. The jury then used the $191.26, which is considered as the overcharge, and multiplied it by the number of subscribers to come up with the damages amount. And when they have the damages, they're trebled. So $4.7 billion trebled comes up to $14 billion. The NFL has said it would appeal the verdict. That verdict could go to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, possibly the Supreme Court. Look, there ain't no way the NFL is going to pay out $14 billion. And the judge is already telling you, hey, the jury didn't quite get it on the damages. It's, it's ironic because we were just talking, yesterday was the anniversary, Tuesday was the anniversary of the USFL verdict where they were awarded $1. They found, there was antitrust by the NFL. They got exclusive television deals. But the USFL was its own worst enemy by switching to the fall, and therefore, led by Donald Trump, who's the owner of the New Jersey Generals, the damage is going to be $1 and trebled. It's $3, and somewhere the check is sitting out. Also, this on the ticket front, and it's a story from D.C. The D.C. Attorney General is suing online ticket provider StubHub for allegedly adding surprise fees into a needlessly long checkout process in violation of local consumer protection laws. And they're talking about the extra add-ons that they have, and it causes them to say that there was an estimated $118 million from extra fees from StubHub, and they're saying that this is an overcharge, and they're going to look into this, and the true price of the ticket is obscured in a way that deceives customers, prevents comparison shopping, the D.C. Attorney General said, so he's filed a lawsuit. All right, the Jim Lampley story. He's got a memoir out. Remember this. This was November of 1993. It was Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield fighting in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And what do you know? Here comes somebody flying into the ring, as Jim Lampley described and discussed it yesterday with Rich Eisen.
And somebody in a parachute has just landed on the edge of the ring, has been pulled away by security guards. The fight has been brought to a halt. There's a massive melee at ringside as this fellow with a motorized parachute has landed right on top of spectators and officials at ringside.
Fan man. I mean, the fan man moment.
Mondo Bizarro. Yeah, and
Yes.
I get about probably 15, 20 seconds of preparation. Producer in my ear, Jim, our cameras are tracking something really strange. There's a guy in some kind of a whirly contraption who is circling above the ring, and he appears as though he's going to aim to try to land this thing in the ring. So just be aware. Just be, be alert while you're calling the fight here that it's quite possible, as far as we can tell, and from what our cameramen are telling us, that somebody's going to try to land a flying contraption in the ring. And he did.
Yes, he did.
And all sorts of chaos broke loose as the result of that. Second fight between Bowe and Holyfield. First fight had been a stunning and unforgettable fist-to-fist battle that Bowe had won with a great and spectacular performance. Holyfield had hired my dearest friend in the world, my closest male friend, Emmanuel Stewart, to try to figure for him a plan to beat Bowe and get the heavyweight championship back. Emmanuel had come up with a genius plan, and now Evander was in the process of executing that. Judy Bowe, Riddick's wife, was, I want to say, 7 or maybe 8 months pregnant. She was pretty close to delivery. Fan Man came down within about 5 or 6 feet of Judy Bowe. Yeah. And I mean, he could have landed it on her if he had lost control at the end or something like that. So Judy Bowe winds up getting taken to a hospital in an ambulance immediately. And now from that point forward, we're trying to call the fight and at the same time wonder what is happening to Judy Bowe, who is ready to deliver a child and is now at the emergency room in the middle of the fight.
And Riddick must have known that, right?
And I am very convinced that Riddick knew that. Yes. Which could not have helped him in the closing rounds of a pretty close fight that was headed toward a pretty close decision in Holyfield's favor.
Wow. I just love that because, you get all sorts of heads up from your producers in your ear in your career. Never like, somebody's got a fan attached and he's circling the stadium. It looks like he's landing.
There's the show that the public sees, and there's the show that we hear in our ears. Okay? And the feedback is not always the same.
That's right.
That's Jim Lampley yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show. He's got a memoir out, which I'm anxious to read, and I've always admired his work. I've missed him doing boxing. He did it for HBO for many years, and then, of course, did the pay-per-view fights, which I guess don't happen anymore. Boxing has pretty much disappeared. Olympic boxing, which used to be such a big part of the Olympics. It's not even on the radar, you know? Remember Sugar Ray Leonard, 1976, from Palmer Park, Maryland, with the picture of his girlfriend, who later became his wife, taped to his sock. And Holyfield was an Olympian. Others and the Bo Holyfield fights, there were 3 of them. Those were big deals, and included the shenanigans of the guy flying into the ring, Fan Man, as he became known, with Jim Lampley calling the play-by-play. So anyway, that's something I want to read. Maybe you'll want to read it as well. Still some summertime left if you want to do that. Coming up, it's the Bram Weinstein Show, now in its new spot, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.